Hello, and welcome to the English with Colin Podcast, a podcast for English language learners. My name's Colin. I'm an English teacher in Tokyo, and if you're looking to improve your English skills and gain more confidence in your ability to communicate in English, you've come to the right place. In these episodes, I'll provide you with short conversations in English that cover a range of topics, from everyday situations to more specialized subjects. These conversations are designed to help you practice your listening skills and pick up new vocabulary and grammar along the way. Regular listening practice is key to improving your English, and I hope this podcast will become a valuable resource for you on your language learning journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. And remember, the more you listen, the more you'll learn. This is episode 36, and today's topic is Culture Shock, Part 3, How to Adapt to Life in a New Country. Hello, Sue.
Hey.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm very well. So we had 2 episodes talking about the kind of things you might experience during culture shock. And here we're going to try to explain some of the ways to avoid it and survive it, I guess. I think a good place to start with is to think of this as an opportunity to learn. Living in another country is about learning, and kind of accept that you don't know everything. You know, you've lived in your country for your whole life, maybe, and you've come to a place where things are very different, and there are things that you don't know, basic things that you don't know. Even take something as simple as how to use the public bus service. You don't know how to do that. And I say this because in some cities in Japan, you get on the back of the bus and there's another door at the front of the bus. So you get on the bus. Some places you take a ticket. Some places you scan your card as you go on. Some places you just pay when you get off. The systems are going to vary, and you need to learn how to do that.
Well, one important one is in Tokyo, if you are going up the stairs or downstairs, you need to be on your left side.
Right. And are you talking about the escalator?
Escalator.
Right.
But Osaka is the other side. You have to be on the right.
Yeah.
But it's an important rule.
Yeah, because they're quite strict about it.
Yes.
And yeah, especially if it's rush hour and people are trying to move through the station quite quickly. If you're standing in the wrong place, then very quickly there's going to be a big queue behind you. And this is a detail of the culture that you need to learn. Like, this is how everybody else does it.
Yes. So learning, it's easier if someone shows you, because that's in reality, that's in life, that's how you learn. You learn how things are done because you see others do it.
Yeah.
It can be your parents, it can be your friends. And when you come to a new country, maybe you can have friends, but not all the time. So you can learn some things. Mm-hmm. But in my case, is just take time to look around and understand how things are happening.
Yeah.
And that has helped me a lot in the sense that I don't know how this is done. So I kind of observe, see how other people do it, think about it, and then try to do it myself.
Yeah, just notice. Take some time, stop, look at what other people are doing. So before you jump in and try to do something and maybe make a mistake, take a moment, look around, how are people doing this? And then...
They teach you without knowing they are.
Right. Yeah.
It happened once. I wasn't sure. You had a restaurant, but you had to go and get your tea yourself or your water.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't understand how. And the glasses where you pour your tea or water, they were not visible to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I took it a little bit of time to observe. And yeah, a lady came in. She took she knew where the cups were.
Right.
She took one out. She did it. And I thought, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
But it's little things like that that make a difference.
Yeah. I think that's a very good example of a very, very small thing. Like how do I get, tea or water in this restaurant? It's a very, very small thing, but it's those small things day after day after day that I find very rewarding about living in another country. Because each time you learn something new like that, it feels like a win. Like, okay, now that's now I know how to do that.
I belong.
Exactly. And I think, when you live in your home country, you don't have those moments so often because you already know how everything works. But when you're placed in a new country, there's so many things you don't know that you do get the chance to have these little kind of daily moments of learning how something is done or how to do something. So yeah, accept that you don't know everything and you're going to be learning for a long time, and it's good. It's nice. This thing you said about just watching other people and seeing what they're doing. It's being aware, being sensitive as well to what is happening around you. What is kind of normal? What's normal behavior? Mm-hmm. For example, take public transport. In Japan, generally, people do not talk on the trains. In Tokyo, at least. You go to Osaka, it's different. But people are quiet. They're maybe on their phone or they're asleep or whatever. They don't eat on the train generally. And that's just kind of normal behavior. And, I look at that and I think, okay, that's how we do it. Fine. That's how we do it. And yeah, just allows things to move a lot more smoothly. But that kind of, just be sensitive, look around, see how other people are behaving, and follow their example. Language skills. I mean, early days. I mean, some people may have studied Japanese before coming to Japan. I hadn't at all. So everything was very, very new for me when I arrived. But those first few months, first few years maybe, taking time to learn basics is very, very important, because it's those basic kind of greetings or short conversations, that's the first interaction you have with people. And I think for some Japanese people who don't speak English very well, if you can say a few words or have a simple conversation in Japanese, it's going to help them relax. And, we've seen this before. I remember we were in a soba restaurant in Yamanashi or somewhere.
In the middle of the mountain, yeah.
Middle of the mountain somewhere. And we were queuing up, and the woman who worked there, she looked at us as though we were tourists, and she was an older woman. I don't think her English was great. So she was probably a little bit stressed that, we got these two foreign people in this soba restaurant in the middle of the mountains. But then when we were able to talk to her, she completely changed.
No, she was very smiley. She was very kind.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, I think she was stressed that she was going to struggle with us to communicate. It was a very very traditional place. You would see it on the floor. I think it was tatami as well.
Yeah.
But once she understood we could communicate, she was very, very kind. And it was delicious as well. It was a great place to have a little bit of lunch.
Indeed. So yeah, language skills, definitely an important thing to get started, and consistency, being consistent with your language study. Don't expect to be fluent in 3 months, but just make sure you're doing a little bit every day, and you enjoy what you're doing. That's probably another episode on its own. I think one thing that is important, especially maybe for younger people coming to live in any foreign country, but Japan is our example. Understand that you need to take care of yourself when you come to be in another country. You are going to get stressed. You are going to get homesick. You are going to feel isolated, because you're away from your family, you're away from your friends,
your culture and your language,
culture, your language. So understand that these are things that you need to kind of work through, and just take care of yourself. Understand when things are starting to get a bit tough. Understand what you can do to relax, to de-stress, to have fun. So whatever it is that you need to do to give yourself time to overcome the stress or the isolation, or the homesickness. Dealing with homesickness, I think, is less of a problem these days, because it's so easy to access say movies or TV shows, or even just to talk to family and friends back home using video chat makes a huge difference. When I first came to Japan 20 years ago, there was no video call. You couldn't do video calls. It started just maybe a couple of years after I had come, but it was still very, very new. So things are a bit different now compared to when I first came to Japan. And yeah, I mean, one thing you can do is try to make friends, try to develop some kind of community as quickly as you can. Whatever it is you like, if you're into playing board games, you can find a group of people who meet up and play board games. If you like photography, there's lots of groups of people who go out and, have an afternoon, going to a nice place, taking pictures. There are groups, there are ways that you can find people so you don't feel isolated. So yeah, understand that you need to kind of take care of yourself, especially if you're here by yourself. If you come out to live on your own, you need to find ways to deal with those difficult emotions. And yeah, I think the last thing we can talk about here is celebrating similarities and celebrating differences.
Absolutely, yes. I think, for example, one thing that I felt made me have a connection with this Japanese culture is the Day of the Dead and then Obon.
Right. And so, explain both of those. Day of the Dead is what?
It's a Mexican celebration. We believe people that have passed away come back on that day. And we have a good celebration because we think they're with us.
And probably not most, but many people will know it from the Disney film Coco.
Coco.
The Japanese title was Remember Me. Remember Me was the song.
That was the song, yeah.
Coco could mean anything in Japanese, so it wasn't a great name in Japanese.
It's the name of the grandmother.
Yes, but the Japanese word koko.
Well, yes.
Anyway, the Japanese title was Remember Me.
And then Oponi is very similar. People that have passed away, they come back and there's a shrine and then in the house, and then people kind of celebrate that, and there's a meal, and they come and they go back to where they are.
So the ancestors. They come back and they're with you.
They're with you, and then they can go back. So I felt like that was a very nice connection. I find it incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's very deep culturally. So those similarities are nice. And then the differences are also very interesting, because you can start questioning, like, oh, why do they do it differently? Or or my culture does this differently? And it gets you into a kind of a thinking, just reflecting on how things are done and why.
Yeah, I think I've certainly learned a lot more about the UK or, Scottish culture from living in Japan, just because I had so many opportunities to compare my culture with Japanese culture. So every kind of new cultural experience I had in Japan, it kind of forced me in a way to think about, okay, well, what would we do back in the UK? And sometimes I would have questions, like, why do we do that? Why do we do this in the UK? But if I was living in the UK, I probably wouldn't ask that question. You just accept it. And that's the funny thing. I would, as a teacher here, I would get questions from my students, and they would be perfectly reasonable questions, good questions about quite basic aspects of British culture or Scottish culture. And I wouldn't have a good answer because I'd never thought about it. And I think being here and forcing myself to, okay, I need to know, I need to find out, like, why do we do this? It's a great opportunity to learn. So yeah, the similarities are fascinating. For example, I was in Kichijoji yesterday, which is a little city. It's a city in western Tokyo. And as you cross the road, a certain tune plays. And it is a tune by Robert Burns. Robert Burns was a poet, musician poet from Scotland. And it's one of his tunes that is playing as the traffic lights change, or as as people are walking across the street. That's a weird kind of, like, why did this happen? So yeah, similarities are fascinating when you see them, and the differences, again, are a great opportunity to learn. But again, this is why you traveled. Well, certainly for me, one of the things was, I want to travel. I want to see how things are done differently. And yeah, that's part of the learning experience, and what makes it so interesting to live in another country. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the English with Colin podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation and found it helpful in your language learning journey. Remember, the key to mastering a language is regular practice. So make sure you listen to our podcast regularly and keep honing your listening skills. We appreciate your support and feedback. So if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for future topics, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to joining you again next time for another conversation in English. Until then, keep practicing and take care.